Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about purchasing a car out of state. I get this question asked all the time. Now, I did make a video probably about a year, it was actually more than a year ago at this point, about purchasing out of state versus in-state, but I wanted to make an update video so I can kind of clarify some things. And so in the first part of this video, I'm going to be going over kind of like the benefits of purchasing out of state versus purchasing a vehicle in the same state that you live in. And then I'm going to kind of expand that into all of the things that you have to do when you do purchase a vehicle out of state. And with all that being said, let's just get into it. Now, a quick disclaimer, most of this advice is just going to be US specific. There are other countries that this could apply to because they kind of like segment their country out into different regions, right? States, provinces, all that kind of stuff. But most of this is going to be US specific. Now, if you're wondering what is the benefit of purchasing a vehicle out of state, there's really two main benefits. Now, the first benefit is just finding the right vehicle. If you're really picky, then it's going to be a huge benefit because it opens up the options that you have. And then the second benefit, which is what most people do if they are going to purchase out of state, is they're just trying to get a better deal on a car than what they can get in their region. And so that's where I'm going to segment it up as into those two different categories. First off, we'll talk about people being picky, and then we'll get into obviously getting a better deal. First off, let's get into being picky with the options. And I'm going to use Utah as an example and pretty much everything because I live here, and so it'll be really easy for me to just come up with examples for today's video. But here in Utah, there's quite a few sports cars, but there's not like a massive amount like somewhere in California, for example, or down in Florida. There's also a ton of sports cars in that area. And so I remember when I was looking to purchase my first sports car, which I ended up getting a Porsche Boxster, an older one, not super old, but an older one. And I remember before I ended up getting that car, I was looking all over the place, all over the country, because there was I think 4 or 5 for sale in Utah. So like 4 or 5 options in the entire state that I had to look at. Whereas nationwide there was hundreds. So it just increased the amount of options because the car I wanted just wasn't very prevalent in the region that I live in. Thank goodness I actually got lucky where one that fit exactly what I wanted ended up coming in state, which was awesome. But usually, I shouldn't say usually, but a lot of times you aren't just going to be that lucky. So that's the first thing, is just being picky and having to increase your search radius. And that's the first benefit of purchasing out state, is you just have more options. And that leads into the next thing with getting a good deal. And this is just crazy how this works. But a lot of people will buy out of state nowadays just to get a better deal on a vehicle, and this can be a huge benefit to you. So again, the example I'm going to use is something here in Utah. So if you guys aren't familiar with Utah, Utah is crazy with the off-roading community. We've got Moab here, and I'm in Salt Lake County, which is probably about 4-ish hours from Moab if you were just to drive there. Just give you guys an idea of distance from how far it is. However, there is just so much off-roading. I can drive 45 minutes in any direction from where I live and just be out in the middle of nowhere. And that's the thing I love about Utah. But because of that, the demand for off-roading vehicles is just ridiculous, and the supply is really low because that's what everyone wants here. Everyone wants a Jeep Wrangler. Everyone wants a Ford Raptor. Everyone wants a Toyota that has a TRD badge on it, even though it doesn't really mean that much anymore, sadly. But because of that, the market value on off-roading vehicles in Utah is just it's way, way up here. And so for me personally, as someone that goes through vehicles pretty quickly for a channel, that can be pretty detrimental. Now, I do have good enough relationships with dealers that I can usually get a better deal on a vehicle, even though it's a hot item. However, that's just not always the case. And something that is really recent that happened is with the Ram TRX. So just to give you guys an idea of just how ridiculous the market is here in Utah. And I think there was probably about a dozen TRXs that got allocated to the state, maybe a little bit more than that, but doesn't matter the numbers. What's more important is how much dealers were marking them up. So the average asking price for a TRX here in Utah was like 20 to 30 grand over sticker. Some are asking $40,000 or $50,000 over sticker for the truck. And obviously that just doesn't make sense for what I do with this channel. And so I end up going out of state. I end up ordering my truck through a dealership in Texas. Shout out to Corbin for hooking me up with that. You guys have seen me post about that on Instagram, but really awesome dealership, really awesome salesperson. He's just helped me out throughout the way. But putting that all aside, again, that's a huge thing with purchasing out of state, because if I had just gone through and bought one in state, I would have literally, at a minimum, had to have paid 40 to 50 grand over sticker for the truck, whereas buying it out of state, not nearly having to pay that much. So it's just a huge difference, and that's the biggest benefit with purchasing out of state, is you're just going to get a better deal on the car potentially, depending on what the market is. Sometimes you'll be lucky where the place that you live in doesn't have a crazy market on that car, so then you'll get a good deal regardless. But if you want a car that's just really in demand with where you live, you sometimes have to go out a little bit farther to get the right deal. Now, aside from the benefits of purchasing out of state, the other question I get all the time is, what are the differences with purchasing out of state versus in state? Like, do I have to do any extra paperwork? Do I have to, what else do I have to do? So the first and most obvious thing is the traveling or the shipping that's going to be associated with out of state. If you purchase a vehicle out of state, you're going to have to do one of two things. You're either going to have to travel to that dealership to pick up the vehicle and then drive it back. So you're going to have travel costs associated with it. So definitely take that into account when you are considering the deal that you're getting on a vehicle. And then the other thing is shipping, which obviously costs money, and that would just be getting the vehicle shipped over to you. And when it comes to shipping, obviously there's the costs associated with it, and then there's the risk associated with it, right? What if that driver gets in a wreck? What if the vehicle gets just damaged in some way during transport? So there's all of that associated with that. So that's the first thing that's different from in-state, because in-state, right, you drive down the street 20 minutes to your local dealership, you pick up the vehicle, you go home, pretty straightforward. Whereas like the TRX that I'm purchasing, it's in San Antonio, Texas. It's like 1,300 miles from where I live. So I'm going to be probably flying out there, might be driving out there. We'll see what happens. But that's the thing, is I have to take into account the travel cost and also the travel time to get all the way back from that dealership. So definitely take that into consideration. And that's the first thing that is different with purchasing out of state. Now, the next thing is going to be how the fees are structured. So when you purchase a vehicle out of state, the dealership cannot title it and register it and do the taxes and everything for you. You have to do that all yourself. So when you purchase a vehicle in state, you can just have that all included basically, and they can take care of all of that for you. But if you live, like I live in Utah, for example, and I'm going to buy a truck in Texas, a dealership that is in Texas cannot register a Utah vehicle for me because they are not in business in Utah. So what I have to do is purchase the vehicle from them, obviously, and then take it into Utah, go to my local DMV, and then that's where I get it registered, pay the taxes, all that kind of stuff. Now, some dealerships do have programs where they can just send the taxes over for you, but most commonly what they'll do is they'll just have you purchase the vehicle from them and then take care of all that stuff yourself. So that's the other thing that's a little bit more footwork for you, because again, in state, it's all done at the dealership. They can send all of the paperwork over the DMV for you. So it makes things a little bit easier on that perspective. So that's another thing to take into consideration, is just the time that's going to be spent with doing that yourself. But honestly, it's not too crazy. It's not too difficult. So it's not like something that you're like, I don't really want to do this. Now, the next thing with out of state is going to be if you're trading in a vehicle, if you're purchasing a used vehicle, and these are kind of in similar-ish categories, and you'll kind of see why I want to say explain it. But first off, if you're buying a used vehicle in state, it's pretty straightforward, right? You go into the dealer, you inspect it, you drive it, and then if you like it, maybe you take it to your mechanic, make sure it's good, and then you buy it, move on with your life. Whereas if it's out of state, you're not going to go fly across the country to go test drive a vehicle. That just doesn't make sense financially unless you're like have more money than brains. But anyways, it just isn't practical. So what you have to do with out of state typically is you've got to obviously call into the dealership, especially if it's across the country, and usually you have to find a third-party mechanic shop to inspect the vehicle for you, and then have the dealership send you videos of the vehicle, pictures, like as much detailed information as you can possibly get. And so that's another different thing with purchasing out of state, is you have to just spend so much more time talking to the dealership and getting as much information as you can, so you make sure that you're buying a good used vehicle and not something that's just completely trashed that you're just not gonna like. And so that's definitely another thing with used vehicles, and that goes along with if you're trading your vehicle. So a lot of people nowadays just don't want to deal with private sale. And I mean, a really good example is actually my older sister. She recently purchased a vehicle, and I was going over with her the difference between private sale and her trading it in. And I was like, yeah, if you sell it yourself, you'll be able to get a little bit more money than if you trade it in. And I obviously went over her specific vehicle and went over how much money more she'd be able to get for it. And the thing that she said to me instantly after I said that is she goes, okay, so what do I have to do? And I go, oh, well, you've got to take pictures of your vehicle that are really professional, so it looks good. You've got to make sure your vehicle's detailed for those pictures. And then you have to post that on a couple different websites so you can get people looking at your vehicle, get traffic from there. And then you have to have people come and test drive your vehicle, all that kind of stuff. And as soon as I went to oh yeah, people are going to come and look at your vehicle because it's a used vehicle and want to test drive and everything, she's like, nope, I don't want to do that. I just want to trade it in. And I understand that a lot of people are like that nowadays. The amount of time that it takes to sell a car is really just, it's not worth it a lot of the times. And so trading in can be so much easier. And if you're going to trade in out of state, then it's a little bit more difficult. So usually dealerships, just like when you're looking at a used car at a dealership out of state, they're looking at your car the same way. They want pictures, maybe they want videos. They want to see as much information as they can so that when you bring it in to their dealership and they've never seen it before, but you obviously want to get a number on it and see how much it's worth, that they aren't going to get just hammered in it. Because working at a dealership, I had that happen a few times where customers would send just a little bit of information, not enough, and then the vehicle would come in and it would just be so much worse than what we thought, and it's just always a crappy situation. And so when you are trading in your vehicle, the one thing that I would recommend, just be honest. Like, the more honest you, and that's just everything in life, but seriously, be honest about your vehicle, be honest about the things that are wrong with it, and then obviously about the things that are positive about it too as well. And if you do that, then you're not going to have any hiccups when you take it into the dealership, especially out of state. Because think if, like, God forbid, you go and travel all the way across the country to go buy a car, and then they go, oh, your vehicle's worth half as much because this, and this are wrong, right? So you want to make sure that you're super transparent so there aren't any hiccups like that. And that's another difference with out-of-state versus in-state. Again, in-state, you just drive down to the local dealership, they inspect it in person, and they go, it's worth this much. Whereas out-of-state, you've got to send info online. It's a little bit more time-consuming. There's a little bit more risk with it, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. And, I mean, you could literally be driving across the country and you get in an accident and then boom, right? So you just never know. So there is a little bit more risk associated with it as well. So I kind of, again, do like a whole risk management with all of that when you are thinking about purchasing out of state. Now, those are the biggest differences with purchasing out of state and just the extra stuff that you have to do. So again, just to reiterate everything, when you are looking to purchase out of state, the only reason that you should be looking to purchase out of state is if you just can't find the vehicle that you want. And then if you can't find the deal that you want and out of state, you found that you can find a deal that's just so much better that it actually accounts for the time that you're going to spend going out of state, and then also the travel costs that are associated with going out of state and the risk that is associated with going out of state. Because I think that people think about the travel cost and sometimes think about the time, but not as much of the time. But I think that people definitely don't think about the risk. And I know that that's like kind of way out there, and some people are going to think that I'm just like crazy, like tinfoil hat. But seriously, whenever I do anything, I always do a massive risk management assessment because I just have to make sure it's like the most viable decision. So like I think about like everything that could possibly go wrong and I go, is it worth it, right? If I'm only saving, for example, if I could buy a vehicle in state versus out of state and it was like a $500 difference, I'm just going to stay in state. Even though I'm spending a little bit more money, I don't have to spend the time. I don't have to obviously do the travel costs, which would probably just, I mean, eat up that $500 anyways. But then also I don't have the risk of what could happen when I do travel as well. So I think about all of that stuff whenever I do anything. And I think that people need to think about that more when they are purchasing out of state because you never know what could happen, right? The chances are pretty small. Hopefully, depending on how you drive and all the use of transportation you use to get down there, the chances are pretty small, but I would always take it into consideration. And it's something that with the TRX, I'm slightly uncomfortable about because I'm thinking, I've never been down to Texas in my entire life. I don't know what it's going to be like driving from there all the way up to Utah with obviously a brand new truck that people are going to be like just all over, I imagine, because it's one of those really highly anticipated trucks. And so it definitely does make me slightly uncomfortable because I'm like, what if something happens to the truck on the trip on the way back? It's also super exciting to have like a road trip on a vehicle you just bought. That's like the best thing ever, just to drive it a bunch as soon as you buy it. But definitely a thought in my mind. Regardless, that all being said, I really appreciate all of you for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, again, just let me know and I can kind of continue these like car buying help videos, whatever you want to call them. And if you're stopping for the first time, please subscribe. I will see all of you in the next video.